this image here is where I actually discovered your work and saw it on Twitter. And the central image here of the Bitcoin feedback loop, right? Which describes the process of Bitcoin's monetization, essentially.
Yes.
And it feeds back on itself. And this was one of the most mind-blowing, when I first discovered this. Again, I saw this in a presentation somewhere, I think. I wish I could attribute the actual source, but I created that particular image in Microsoft Excel and put it in one of my published essays. So when I saw you publishing this online, this was the centerpiece of your work. I was like, oh, I wanted to look into this, and that's what got me looking into your work.
Fantastic. You see, everything is connected.
Yes,
right?
Yeah. And also the feedback loop is fascinating too, because I've found that that's how nature really operates. I mean, you see this a lot in biology, right?
Absolutely.
We often think, the Newtonian model, A causes B causes C, linear causality, billiard ball model of the universe, but that's not actually how it works. It's every time cause and effect are mutually interactive in a way. And so that's more the feedback loop model.
I adore this graph because this is really the essence, right? If we had to choose one single graph for this presentation, I would say this one. And I'm so happy that actually you created it. So first of all, thank you. And
thank you to whoever I got it from, because I didn't create it.
I'm going to attribute you as the creator of that graph. But I did add one thing that is the difficulty adjustment, because I think is also a very important component. It's almost like, this, it's like a thermostat,
That's right.
So it's some kind of, because also that is another thing that we find often in nature, where there is some kind of inhibitory phenomena, like, for example, prey and predator, right?
Yes.
If predators are too much, then they
They'll
don't have
a
enough
population
food,
collapse.
And so, they control each other.
Right.
So, or, in the brain, for example, we get excited about something, we get this burst of adrenaline or whatever, but then we need to bring back that excitement, because otherwise we will do crazy things. So we have a bunch of other, or even the muscles, right? You have the inhibitory type of muscles, where if you do one action in one direction, you are balanced by the other muscle in the other direction.
There's all this opponent processing that's pervasive in nature. Yeah.
So you see that a lot. And Satoshi was a freaking genius adding that difficulty adjustment. And is also a very important component in why we have these beautiful power laws, because it's another feedback loop there, right? Hashrate goes too far, I want to bring it back. I want to adjust it, right? And it's fantastic, because in this way you get both growth and stability at the same time. It's really the best of both worlds. And so the idea is that I remember when I told you the M is kind of a fingerprint of a phenomena, right? If you put your hands on that, then you get all this insight about what is going on with the phenomena, what is fundamental about that phenomena. Like, for example, with the Kleber's law, what is fundamental, that there is this economy of scale, right? And then in the book and in the paper, they show the rabbit hole that tells you where it comes from, what are the causes. And it turns out, if you remember, the story has to do with the circulatory system that that is actually supposedly is the area of a vessel and the volume of how much blood goes through. That will have to be 2-3, but because it's so the vessels are so ubiquitous and they became almost like a fractal, right? It's almost like actually our body is 4-dimensional, but not quite. So it's 3/4, right? Do you remember the story that is very, very cool, that as humans, we are almost like 4-dimensional, not quite. That is why you have a 3/4. So once you start to explore these things, these power laws, they are really, really deep topic. You can learn a lot of things. Same thing with Bitcoin. I couldn't, for months and months, I was torturing myself. I was thinking, where that 6 come from? Where that 6 come from? Why 6? What is the origin of that 6? And then, this was when I actually started to interact more with the X community, and people were talking to me, were giving me feedback. So I still remember I went to sleep. I couldn't sleep. And I was thinking about this damn 6. And then I said, you already found all these other power laws. Can you put them together? You found one between price and addresses and time. Let's go back and measuring them again because I didn't remember the exponent. I know that we were power law, but and then when I plotted all of them, hash rate, addresses, price, I realized, addresses grow with the power of cube. The price reacts to the addresses with the square. So basically we have price equal addresses square, but that grows with the cube of time. We have a power of 6, right? Because the time to the cube squared give you time to the 6. And now we know why we see that beautiful power law in time, because there is adoption, right? So this is why the diagram, because if you read the diagram, right, it says, okay, there is demand of store of value that is started with Satoshi. Satoshi created this. He said, okay, I'm going to put my energy and time and focus on this thing and this creation. That attracted his friends, right? Is cyberpunk people say, okay, yeah, this is a cool project. Let's help Satoshi with debugging. And Alfini started to run away. I remember that post, right? I'm running Bitcoin.
Yes,
so he's
Bitcoin,
using
right.
his energy atom and he's putting some money and some energy, right? That we are linked and his mental energy in the system. And that's what he does. And so at every step, I show the relevant power law, right? In that case, is the power law of adoption, which grows with the cube. And then you go to the next step because that increase in demand, I would change the word demand because it's more like the demand and supply, and with Bitcoin doesn't work like that. It's more like adoption, right? So simply, I want to join the network, right? And it's a sort of demand.
I mean, demand works here in my opinion because it's ultimately demand to hold the asset, right? And not sell it.
Exactly. And that
is equivalent to adoption.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so and then the next one relevant is how the adoption relates to price, right? Through the Metcalfe law. So it's a direct relationship. Increasing adoption makes the growth of the price because of this relationship, the square. It is actually, if we double the number of people, we get 4 times the value, right? Because it goes up with that square, right?
Yeah.
It's that multiplicative effect.
Yeah.
It is amazing because if it was this were, and is a it's a philosophical issue. This is why demand, because usually demand for an asset should bring the price linearly up, right? But in this case, because it's adoption.
Well, here's the thing: is because my counter argument to that, or counterpoint to that, would be that Bitcoin is the first asset with a perfectly inflexible supply schedule.
Yeah.
So that all demand registered against it actually is expressed in the price, not necessarily non-linearly, but more likely to be non-linear because there's no supply response to accommodate additional demand. So all the increases in demand have to be expressed in price.
I need to explore more there because anytime I try to include it mathematically, like, where the supply, the fixed supply comes in. Now, it's a beautiful concept. If you think about in terms of physics, it looks like energy conservation.
That's
so
right.
It's one of these invariants that are very fundamental. Because power laws are also about invariant, right? Because that slope is an invariant of a system. Like I change.
It's like Bitcoin mirrors the second law of thermodynamics very nicely.
So there is some kind of conservation of energy or conservation of money that I want to develop. That will be another direction that I want to explore. But right now, I don't know yet. I want to understand why the price, how in the heck something that is traded in the market, etc., knows to value itself like if it was a network. I don't know exactly the mechanism yet. It's something that I want to explore. But the beauty of the data says it is. Like, look at that nice relationship, right, between price and addresses. That is the Metcalfe law. And then when you combine these two things, they give you price versus time. That is the power of 6. Now, the next step, right, is that increase in price attracts the miners, right? That is what in that loop, verbatim, this is what it says. Now, what is a relevant power law? Is the power law between the price and the hash rate. So it turns out that is hash rate equal price square. Now, I have a theory why that is true. It goes like this. The price increases, that brings more hash rate because people say, "Whoa, now I can make more
Mining
money,
is more profitable,
make it more profitable." And so, but you will expect a linear relationship. Why is a square? Well, because when the difficulty adjustment kicks in, it needs to compensate for the price, but it needs also compensate, and the increase in hash rate due to the price increase, but it needs to compensate also for the fact that the mined coins are also proportional to the price, right? So to keep everything in equilibrium, it needs to adjust for 2 times or price square relatively to the price. So the hash rate is going to be proportional to the price square because of this. And it's kind of a order of magnitude argument, right? Like a back of the envelope calculation, but I actually did a simulation of that and I got exactly. But in this case, what that means is not that the hash rate drives the price, it's the other way around. It's the price that drives the hash rate. The only place, like we discussed it before, where the hash rate drives the price is the bottom. It's the only place. And I did all these causality studies where I did show that actually that is the case.
So again, you're giving credence to the feedback loop, right? That the causality changes based on where we are in the market cycle.
Where we are on the market cycle. Now, and then the next step is what? That increase in hash rate brings more security, right?
Yes.
Because now it's more difficult to do the 51% attack.
Right.
And many people criticize that. We say, well, the average user doesn't think like that. Oh, there is more security in the system. Let me buy.
Yeah,
but you know what?
You could also credit it again back to imitation, right? It's where it's more widely adopted.
I'm sure the banks do. Because they are not going to invest $100 million in Bitcoin and thinking
it's also reflected in liquidity, right? The daily liquidity. Yeah,
exactly. But also, there is some reasoning about, look, there is all this infrastructure where all these companies invest in hundreds of million dollars in mining facilities. So the system is maturing and is growing, and there is all this investment. So if not me and you, for sure, the banks are considering all these things. And then, given the banks are investing more, then me and you say, whoa, BlackRock is buying Bitcoin, so maybe I should buy too.
Exactly.
So indirectly, unconsciously, I think that security increase brings in more adoption is a fundamental component.
For sure. Again, that where you talk about like these winner-take-all effects, right? Where you see an industry consuming more electricity, right? That's an indication that it is bigger or more successful than others. And so in some market spaces, especially like money, you want the deepest and most liquid market, right?
Exactly.
That's why gold, money historically tended towards a winner take all effect where we ended up with gold as the global standard because everyone wants the deepest and most liquid market because that's what the purpose of money is to trade it for something else.
Exactly.
So you would expect Bitcoin as digital gold to have a similar power law effect.
And then the loop closes, right? Because that increase in security brings more adoption and blah, blah, blah. And so it's a fantastic thing, right? And it's almost mystical because, this idea of it's almost like the Ouroboros, right? The snake that eats its own tail. And it's like an ancient symbol of infinity. So it's called the soul of the world, right?
The most ancient symbol.
That there is no beginning and there is no end.
Exactly.
It's all a cycle, that repeats itself at its own pattern, etc.
Yeah.
And again, that Bitcoin is like when I saw this, I say, it's amazing because you see Bitcoiners are coming up with these intuitions. We are understanding it from, let's say, a philosophical point of view. And then the mathematics backs up exactly the intuition.
Yes.
Like Saylor saying that it's a digital city. Well, digital cities behave like power laws.
Right.
And so...
And to echo your earlier point, the difficulty adjustment is perhaps the most philosophically fascinating thing about Bitcoin because it's the first asset that actually adapts to our attempts to produce it. So it is... It is moving, it is countervailing our efforts to extract it more quickly. So it is almost like it's been called a digital organism, I think, by Hal Finney, right? He said it's the first digital organism.
Absolutely.
Because it is actually adapting to our attempts to get it.
Organisms need to have, this is why I call this an inhibitory process, right? And it looks like a negative thing, but without that inhibition, you will not be able to exist like an animal, right?
We would have mined all the Bitcoin by now if we didn't have the difficulty
like
adjustment.
organism, right? They eat and need to have some kind of inhibitory system. Say, I'm full,
right?
Don't eat more because you're going to feel sick, right? The food is going to become poison if you eat too much of it. There are people that died because they challenged themselves, to drink too much water in a party or so on, and they died, right? Even a good thing can be bad if you have too much of it or too quickly. So that difficulty adjustment is genius. It's so simple, right? You just proportionally adjust the difficulty to mine that block, right? By proportionate to the hash rate. And it's fantastic because it's the first asset. I don't know of any other asset that is like that. It has this inhibitory process. So it really makes it like an organism. So it's incredible that we have 6 power laws at every stage of this circle. But it would have been strange if we didn't find any power law at all, So it's almost like, it's obvious that you're going to see power laws in this system.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing. And then all those, we think these are just metaphors or analogies. Bitcoin is a city, Bitcoin is a language, Bitcoin is an organism. But it is actually real. All of those things in the sense of power laws.
Exactly. It backs up. From a physics point of view, when you make these analogies, when we say that light is like a wave, we are not kidding. It's not it's poetry in a sense, but it's the poetry of nature, the poetry of reality. It's real. There are real one-to-one correspondence between the water waving and light waving. Now, there are also differences, right? Sure. And you have to understand both the similarities and the differences. But at the same time, if you abstract and you go to this level where you see, it's one thing, right? They have the same behavior. Yeah. It's really beautiful.
And the double slit experiment on the light waves, it's how the observer is looking at it, right? Whether it manifests as wave or particle. And there's some similarity here with Bitcoin.
I think that's true, because you can say, if you look at the daily price, for example, right, you see that chaotic behavior and this all undetermined, and this like another asset. You can really predict what is going to do tomorrow, and you have that unpredictability, etc. So that could be an analogy, right? When you look at it in that way. When you zoom out and you see the overall behavior, because even on the slit experiment, if you see just the single little dot, you don't see a pattern. If you just could see every single little dot, you see one dot here, one dot there. It looks chaotic. And then when you look at the collective behavior, you start to see this pattern. You start to see these interference patterns. And so that could be a very good analogy that is very relevant. It has this yin and yang type of behavior too. That is, again, you could write an entire philosophy book just derived from the property of a power law.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.